Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart, and I'm facilitating a conversation with my good friend Peter Scalzo, who's been on his, are you at 18 years yet, or are you still close? July will be 18 years of cancer journey. And so he's actually acting like he's going to be the facilitator today, and I'm the host, and we'll see how this plays out, but I don't know if that actually is how it works. But today we are going to talk about a topic that I'm pretty familiar with, and I think it's important to all of our journeys. But I'm going to let you introduce the topic, and we'll have a conversation about it.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. Well, you are a Yoda on this topic. I know you don't like to hear that, but that's, so I've been thinking about this. I was on vacation for 9 days this past week, and I was thinking about just a concept for my life that has been very meaningful, and I think would be very meaningful for a cancer patient. And it's something that, since my relationship with Sean, it's been presented in a certain fashion, and I'm just going to go ahead and say it. So we like to dwell in a concept called the gift of limits. Now, usually when we say the word limit or limitation, it's not a friendly word. And I was thinking about it in the context of a cancer journey, because as soon as we receive a diagnosis, as soon as I received my diagnosis of cancer, I entered a world of limitations. I all of a sudden had to comply physically with a lot of surgeries that really limited me. I mean, physically, my body was altered and changed really permanently through a lot of my surgeries. I've had many of them. That were very invasive, but also emotionally even. And my emotions, my tough emotions, have really increased since my cancer journey. But what a limit on my emotional life. At first, I thought I'm limited to this range here, and I also. In my workspace, there did come a point in my cancer journey that I've been on in 2017 where I had to leave work. I had to go on permanent medical disability. And that was a limitation I didn't want. I still wanted to practice law. I wanted to be productive in that sense, and got a lot of value from performance. And so limitation and being limited in that space was not a friendly, welcoming thing. And so I was thinking, this concept called the gift of limits, there's a whole nother perspective of thinking about limitations, right?
There definitely is. And this isn't actually something that we came up with. I think that term I first heard from Pete Scazzaro, and in his Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, he's talked a bunch about the gift of limits and the importance of it. And I, too, didn't think of limits as a gift. I saw them as a barrier to be kicked down. And so in Western culture, I think in general, we have this idea, the self-made man, and you just need to figure out how to work harder, work faster, be stronger, and achieve. And those aren't bad things in themselves, but they are at some point in time when your value, your worth, is based upon this. And I think what happens for most of our journeys is, as we get into the journey a ways, we find that we're not enough. Like, we did not, in our own power, find value, worth in ourselves. We're limited in that way just by itself. And the moment that realization becomes kind of to fruition or solidified in us, I think there's a deep chasm. There's a hole that needs to be filled, and so we start searching a bit. But the gift of limits is recognizing that God has something more for us than achievement, than doing, and it is this idea of being. And I think the reason why it's a gift is we figured this out in our limits a bit. I don't know if that makes sense to you, if maybe we interact on that just a little bit there. But I don't think I realized it until I hit the wall, and we've talked about the wall. When you hit the wall and you figure out that all your efforts, everything that you've done in your life is not enough, there's a limit. There's a big limit. And I think probably for you, when you found out there was no medical solution for your cancer journey, there was a limit. For a while, you could research, you could try to come up with something new to address this or find a way to pursue healing. But there was something of great joy, I think, that comes when we see the limit and we embrace it, not as a curse, but as a gift. And maybe that fits in with some of your experience, but I'll talk about a bit of some of mine. And you and I have a close friend, and he's taught a lot to me about this gift. And I'll actually mention, he works here at our organization. His name's Wes. If you met him, you would see that he's spent his entire life in a wheelchair. And every day he has to have help to eat, to use the restroom in certain cases, and to get around. He has massive limits. And on the surface, I could look at that and say, wow, that's a curse. And if looked at and from one lens, I think we would say, yes, he's been cursed with the chair, the inability to run, to walk, to live life like the average person. And then there's another angle to look at it from, is that limit gives him a completely different life and completely different expectations and a whole sphere of time and energy that is spent different than the average person. And inside that limit is a beautiful gift. And it's sometimes hard to embrace that gift, but there's a beautiful gift sitting right there to be interacted on and learn and grown from. And it might be that, we say sometimes, your greatest strength is your greatest weakness, or flip it around, your greatest weakness is your greatest strength. And this is an example of what we're talking about, is recognizing that limits aren't there to punish us, but they're actually there to give us something of a gift, but we have to look at it from a different lens. I don't know if that helps a little bit.
It does, but help me flesh out my own situation.
Great. Yeah. So you just described a second ago you wanted to get your value from your career and from drive and success. And sometimes being a self-made man is how we get our value. And so as you went to disability, you had no ability. Like if you went out and earned, you would probably destroy this disability benefit. And so there was a limit, but also you had a legitimate disability and you were not able to go out and create value in that space. Where did your time go?
Yeah, right. So I had a new fatigue element, all kinds of physical limitations that crept in. And really it was a great decision for me to step into full-time disability. There's no way I could practice law full-time like that.
Right.
It would be a disservice to my clients. And so, yeah. So what was your question again? How did I spend my time?
Yeah. How did your time,
so
changed your time profile completely, because you were actually spending, I bet 50, 60 hours a week in this space, if even not more.
Right.
And now that went to zero.
Yeah.
And what happened to your time? Some of it was eaten up by medical journey and so forth, but not all of it.
Right. Yeah. And I think that was a journey, but I'll just talk about how I spent my time. I won't even talk about the emotional journey, but just the journey of asking myself, where do I find life and passion and purpose? And of course, when I was sent home in 2017, it was to do an end-of-life process. That was the plan. It was call hospice care, get them all set up, get your estate in order, and let's do an end-of-life process. We didn't know how much time that would take. And so I chose to, I asked myself, what's one of the most important things? If you had 6 months left to live, this is the question, what would you do? Mm-hmm. And I think for me, and I wrote about this briefly in my book, but I didn't want to buy a fast car, go on vacations and do all that. I wanted to leave a legacy for my kids. I have 6 children, and I thought, I'm going to be leaving them, this earth and them. And so what kind of legacy, how do I want them to remember me? What sort of lasting impact do I want to have on their lives? And so I turned to my own personal spiritual growth. And so I started to record YouTube videos of my journey through the Serenity Prayer. Mm. And because I think that said a lot about what I wanted them to know about my heart, which was, this is how I do hardship. This is how I do difficulties. This is the role God plays in all that. These are my choices. And so I thought, what better way to leave a part of me with them than to do these YouTube videos, but also spending time with them.
Yeah.
You know, I was home all the time, and I was doing medical appointments, like you said, but it was, I want to spend time with them.
Now imagine if you didn't embrace that limit and you said, well, yes, I'm being forced a bit into disability, but I'm still going to find a way to create value in the legal sphere because that's where my identity is from. And I need to, study, do some side client work, do all these things to try to still get some value. So I'm still viewed as a top tier lawyer, or I'm still, viewed as important in the legal community or at church or in areas, because I need to maintain my status. I wasn't willing to accept that I am now a cancer patient. I need to still be a lawyer.
I think we all have examples of people who we hear about their passing and we're shocked because they worked up until their time of passing and they were completely silent about a cancer journey that they had been on, that kind of a thing. They just wanted life to be normal so they can, and I think normalcy is healthy for a cancer patient when they can get done with their treatment and get back to some sort of normalcy they can feel alive again, like themselves.
Yeah.
But I say that, but then I thought, I don't think I ever felt more alive than when I didn't have to work and I was in that space of speaking into my kids' lives.
That's actually a beautiful example there. And I want to take two outside of the cancer journey for a bit. And I think it's because it could be that you could just view cancer as the limit, and that your physical abilities have been diminished in some way, or your time has been now going to be consumed with chemo or healing from surgery, or these could be the limits you could think about. But there's a lot more there to think about. And so I want to delve in a little bit. So for me here, I'm responsible for a ministry here. And so I've been given the title of CEO. And so who I report to is the board. Now, the board has views about where the ministry should go, how the ministry should operate, and, how fast, how long, and, the direction and vision. And my first several years here, I viewed the board as an impediment. And so I viewed them as the group of people I needed to get through somehow, to convince or to get out of the way, because they were stopping me from being able to lead well. In my mind, it was, I had these great ideas and the board was a limit that was a problem. Now, what's happened in time is I've recognized that the board is actually a group of people that are full of wisdom and understanding and a gift to the ministry here. And they're a limit that when I embrace them as that they came from God, that God has the people there in place for a reason. And if I embrace that, there's something either great to learn from, or wisdom to be garnered, or support for the ministry in some way that moves us forward. I no longer am in conflict with the board. They're part of the team. And so the limit is a gift. And what's happened even in limits past that is we're always constrained in a ministry sense financially. And without that constraint, I wouldn't actually get to see the power of God work. And so there's been times when the limit of finances has caused us to say, hey, we're not going to do this or that. We're not going to be able to do these services, or we're not going to be able to move forward in a certain way. And what happened is I became completely reliant on God, because the limit itself that we had, it wasn't one that I could just overcome by, snapping my fingers and making money appear, or I could choose to go out and try to create value through some kind of work-based something, but that would then have the opposite of there's no time spent in the ministry space. And so when I look at this and I approach this, the limit itself allowed me to experience God's provision. Because what's happened is every time we've gotten close to that point, close to bankruptcy or close to running out, God showed up, in some manner, and it's always a surprise. And so when I live out of my strengths without limits, I don't get to experience the peace of knowing that God actually has me in his hands. And so if I hold myself and I work at levels that are trying to overcome the limits on my own, what I get is the result of my own hands. But if I embrace those limits and then I sit in those and I enjoy the gifts that God has in the limits of maybe not running as hard and spending more time in silence and solitude, in peace and reflection, what happens is I get to see,
excuse me,
I get to see in that moment God show up and meet me there. And I think that's something that's probably really important for a cancer patient to think about is if you run around and you see that it's your effort that's going to cause you to solve this situation that you're in, my bet is you're going to run yourself weary. And as you run yourself weary, you're probably going to hurt your health rather than help your health, in the sense of weariness is not a place to heal from. And as you are able to relax into, hey, here's the limit I've been given, here's the treatment that's been chosen, and I'm going to put that into God's hand, then what's going to happen is you're going to get to see God show up in your own life. And it may just be in your spiritual development. There's no promise of physical healing, but it probably will benefit your physical healing at the same time because you've embraced a gift of slowing down and not chasing every possible last nuance to the point of exhaustion.
So I have two questions for you.
Yeah.
What role does God play in limits? And then the second thing is, how do you embrace it as a gift?
I think that's a good question. And the example that I gave a second ago is recognizing that authorities like law, you and I have a biblical worldview. God put rulers in charge. And when we look at that, it is all of the things that are around us, the structure that's been given, governments, boards, levels of authority, whether it be even in family situations, these are God-given in every sense of the manner. And when we honor that, we get to see God show up and work through those limits. And so his role, I believe, is, in a sense, it's a faith journey in that he's asking us with limits to trust. And when we trust, we get to see provision. And sometimes that provision isn't the provision that we expect. Sometimes we get to see something even greater. And I think that's the point that I would like to kind of put out there. There's kind of this Ephesians concept of, what God has for us is greater than we could even think and ask. And so as we're striving, trying to work through and pass the limits, we miss out on the best. And so his role, I think, is to provide the best. And so I think he's ordained and put limits in our lives so we could experience him, as opposed to us looking at them and going, I got the worst luck in the world. Everything's going against me. And if we go down that road, there's truth in that. There are things that are negative emotions and negative situations, death, pain, deep hurt. But if we embrace that God has something beautiful to experience through those limits, we're going to find that it's greater than we could think or ask. And that experience has happened many times, but I have to keep learning it over and over and over. And so I don't know if your experience is similar. It's like, I think I've gotten past this limit, and then, the next financial pressure comes and I feel anxious again. I think it's similar to a cancer patient. It's like you are saying, hey, you live test to test. And so the next test coming in, you may feel anxious. What's the results going to be? And how are things going to go? And the limits, you don't get to control that. But you have to embrace there's a process you're going through and learn how to release the outcome to God. And if it's not what you want, embrace that there's a gift in that for you. I don't know if that's helpful. Answers your question enough.
It is. And I think about the ways that I know God now intimately that I wouldn't have without limitations in my life. For instance, as a healer, as a rescuer, deliverer, those kinds of concepts of God that I didn't understand before the cancer limitation. And I will say that I think if you asked me, even as an attorney in the height of my success doing that, Peter, what in your heart of hearts really brings you to a place of life, like of real deep meaning and purpose? I would say that, well, I once thought about being a pastor. I just enjoyed and really my heart would enlarge when I was in a place where people were being transformed, where they were gaining victory and being transformed in their lives, having a deeper connection with God. And as an attorney, that's not something that I worked with.
Yeah.
And so when the limitation did come and in 2017 and actually the new immunotherapy treatment, which wasn't on the horizon at that point, but did come out, and I found out that I was going to live but still be on disability. It opened up the whole world of recovery and being involved in that, and also cancer support and everything. I could be immersed in those areas where that really brought me deep meaning and purpose.
So you're carrying out a greater passion that God's put in you.
Yes, absolutely.
Just by embracing the fact that you had to give up something to get that. And I think that's a key point is when we look at our lives, I think there's something really important is to think about we only have so much time. All of us are struggling with a time allotment more than we are anything else. And when we bring something new in, something has to leave. We're always in a prioritization. And it could be that maybe a person is just a television hog or something like that, and so they have to give up a television show. A pretty small cost. But I think for most people, we try to stuff extra things in. And so if I want spiritual development, well, let me just start doing spiritual development. But something else is going to get squeezed out because we're limited to a certain amount of time. And I think there's so much of my life that I've gone on. It's like, well, I'm just going to add something. I'm going to add something. And this is a process of recognizing, no, actually I want the best. I need to subtract some things. I need to subtract lots of things usually. And it's really embracing the best and recognizing that there's a lot of good stuff out there or things of value. But what you just said seems so important to me. It is, you had a passion inside of you. And it's a passion that was never able to be developed because it was being squeezed out by other things. And not bad things, not even unimportant things, but it wasn't the best. And God gave you a limit and you squeezed out of that limit the best. And this is the gift of limits. It's recognizing, like in my case, the board isn't working against me. It's a group of people that can be so for moving forward what we're doing here, that have talent, skills, abilities, and bring something that God wants to bring to this ministry, to this place. And my controlling nature I want to have control. And so I don't want to limit. And that can happen in so many areas of my life, but it was such an important thing for me to get to, for this ministry to be able to move forward. I had to embrace that limit and see that as a gift, not as a curse.
Yeah, I think, and there's a scripture passage by the Apostle Paul where he basically says, I've learned how to be content in all circumstances. And he was in prison at the time, but talk about limitations.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about how many people do I know, even myself, am I content in all circumstances? And, am I content with the intellect capacity that I have, with my physical capacity the way it is, with my financial, because going on disability, I'm confined just to disability payments, the relationships that I have, all these, I have limitations on me. And so, the issue for me is, am I, like you said before, and do I view this in a negative way, or do I view this as these limitations as gifts? And therefore, can I be content within my limitations?
Yeah, let me give another example.
Just
to
please.
Keep there, because I think it's the more we give examples, and I think it'll help bring more understanding. Is poverty a gift? And I think almost everybody would say no. But you and I both have been successful in the world, and I laugh all the time when you tell me, "Hey, for a few years now, you moved into a new house."
Almost 5 years.
Yes, you lived out of 7 banker boxes in a small 2-room apartment or whatever it was.
It was a 1-bedroom apartment.
A 1-bedroom, yeah. So, and you had a monster house with every imaginable. Your whole family was there. That your kids were raised there. But what a gift to not have the responsibility of managing great wealth. Because once you have a bunch of assets and things, there's all this stuff that needs to be done. You're always think about, if you have wealth itself, that you have to manage where those investments are at, what's going on with them. And if you have physical assets, there's maintenance, upkeep, things degrade quickly. And wealth is a curse as much as it is a blessing.
Yeah.
And I say that from experience. Is like every asset that I've ever owned degrades. And I find myself working on maintenance and figuring out, and you can't, you look at the specs of any piece of equipment and their expectations for upkeep, every 50 hours, 100 hours. It's just, there's so much to be done. But if you're poor, are you thinking about those things? Not at all.
Yeah.
That's not where your mind is. You're not trapped in, chasing, what's the best stock pick for your $5 that you have in your hand. Your focus is much, much smaller and narrower. And what does that mean? It means you have time to invest in spiritual things and other things that are higher value than managing wealth. In our culture, we don't think about that. We think managing wealth and having wealth is the most important value. But there's a great gift in the limit of poverty. But we have to look at that, and then it can be such a gift you could pursue it. I want to narrow down. I don't want to hold all that wealth. I don't want to manage all these things. I want to live a simpler lifestyle. And you hear people talk about simpler lifestyle. Well, there's
minimalist, yeah.
Minimalist, yes.
Yeah.
And so once you start looking at it, it's really the angle we're looking at it from. And God has a gift in these limits. And so if you've been made poor, it's a gift. If you've been made rich, it's not really a limit, may not be a gift, but in some sense, in God's given us each responsibilities that He's called us to carry out. But I think you understand what I mean by this. Is think how much time you spent and how much time I've spent over the years managing wealth or managing assets. And the moment I recognize there's gifts and limitations, and I start embracing that, I start to experience peace that comes from God. And that peace is usually counterintuitive to what we would think in our normal world, especially the westernized world. We've got so caught up in this idea of wealth and achievement.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm some of my character defects are really valuing myself on performance, and I'm a big list guy, so I would have a list of so many items and valuing myself. Wow, I had a good day today. I got my list done, or I got half of it done, or whatever. But to really sort of turn that on its face and say, you know what? What if I'm not performing as an attorney? What if I don't have a list today? Can I still find value just in a relationship with my higher power? Can that be my value? I say yes, but it's amazing how I don't know if I'd even been able to have this discussion except for the fact that I've lived limits in my life and seen the benefit of having those limitations on myself, on my schedule, everything. So it's really interesting discussion, Sean. Very helpful too.
I remember when I came into mission here, I was going to kick butt, take names, and I was going to outwork everybody here. And in one sense, I took off on that course. And what it gave me wasn't ministry success. It gave me exhaustion. And I think that is such an important thing. I think the thing that is really, as you digest this concept a little bit and you think about it, I love something you said there is I think inside of us, understanding where we're valued and why we're valued. And I've had a false narrative that's played in my head. Busy is important, is valued. And it's false. Busy is not important and valued. Valuable is someone who has time to spend on the important things of life. Busy is just that, is busyness, is busy work. And it can really miss what's most important, which means that you lose peace. Because when you spend your life on things that aren't important in busyness, there's no peace there. You can never achieve enough. And you can never have a full enough schedule to ever get there. But if you could slow down, embrace limits, recognize that busyness isn't the highest value, it isn't where your value comes from at all, then there's great peace in being able to relax in where real value does come from. And I think that's the point of embracing the gift of limits.
And this podcast is called Cancer and Peace. So thanks for tying that up for us, bringing us to a place of peace that it really is true.
So wonderful. I think we're at the end of our time too. So Jack gave me the signal saying, Sean, wind this thing down. No, I enjoyed talking about this this topic. I think it's such a big topic. Scalzo does a lot of work in this space, and but you and I are actively engaging. We're not gurus at this because there's so many areas I still need to embrace those limits. But I would just encourage anyone to take a look at that in their own life. Where are they not embracing limits, authorities, and things that God has placed in your life to slow you down so that you could get the best. And so that's a wrap for today. If you want more info on Cancer and Peace, go to the website, cancerandpeace.com. You'll see Peter's book, several other authors and sources that we use here. So go there, enjoy, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sean.